I think by creating a new band, they're trying to bypass all the wrongs that they did.
Tonight, a First Nation that was enfranchised in the 50s wants to be reinstated. The federal government says no.
I'm glad they're taking those benches they've put up around here because, you know, someone can get hurt.
Problems with violence around the Whitehorse emergency shelter is making the area look prettier a solution.
That's what we're trying to get back here, is the reunification of what a family is.
And in Saskatchewan, for over 20 years, families from a community gather to bond and heal. Good evening, I'm Beverly Andrews. Welcome to APTN National News. Some emotional testimony today in the inquest into the death of a man who died following a police chase in Saskatoon. 2 police officers held tears back as they recounted the moments leading up to the death of Austin Eagle Chief. CTV's Laura Woodward reports.
For 2 years, Alicia Stewart has been unable to fully return to her job as an officer. 3 times a week, she has to go to physio, recovering from her recent elbow surgery. Her injuries stem from an incident that happened here in the River Heights neighborhood. This was Stewart's police car. She was half inside the passenger side of the car, the door still open when it was rammed by a stolen truck that Stewart and other officers were trying to stop. Quote, "He tried to kill me," Stewart said, referring to the driver of the stolen truck, later identified as Austin Eagle Chief. The inquest into Eagle Chief's death resumed Tuesday, where Stewart, on the stand, held back tears as she remembered thinking her partner was killed. Quote, "I just saw a puddle of red fluid and I thought Constable Bertrand was dead. I turned around, I saw Bertrand walking towards me, so it was a big relief." The stolen truck fled the neighborhood and ended up here, crashing into another vehicle in Saskatoon's north end. 22-year-old Austin Eagle Chief was pronounced dead on the scene, his body found wedged under the steering wheel, and his passenger was arrested. Now, the testimonies we're hearing are not part of a criminal proceeding. The purpose of an inquest is not to make any convictions, but rather figure out what led to Eagle Chief's death to avoid similar deaths from happening in the future. Laura Woodward, CTV News, Saskatoon.
APTN has been following the story of the Michelle Band in Alberta. The federal government says the band was voluntary enfranchised in the 1950s, giving up their band status. But some members have been working to get the band reinstated. Now, the federal government says reinstatement will not be happening. Chris Stewart brings us the latest.
In 1958, the last remaining members of the Michelle Band were enfranchised. They gave up their Indian status. The last remaining land was gone, sold to settlers. Shortly after, the land was discovered to be worth billions in gravel deposits. Today, several groups of people are trying to get the band reinstated. They have been in talks with the federal government for years.
We're tired of Canada giving us the runaround.
Rosalind Calahoo and Brandy Calahoo are trying to bring back the Michelle Band, but they have differences on who should be included. Rosalind Calahoo is with the Michelle Band Unity Group. Her group represents Michelle Treaty descendants, both status and non-status. Brandy Calahoo is with the descendants of Michelle First Nation Association. They also represent status and non-status members, but also include those who don't have band cards, but can prove their genealogy. While the two groups were talking with the federal government, it was APTN that told them the bad news. Last Friday, APTN received a statement from Indigenous Services Canada stating there is no provision in the Indian Act specifically for band reinstatement. A new band must be created. Both Rosalind and Brandy Calahoo says it seems like the government wants to avoid paying for the mistakes of the past.
It's a big deal because they need to make amends for the past. I think by creating a new band, they're trying to bypass all the wrongs that they did to our nation. And they don't want to deal with those because there's many.
We should have recognition under the Indian Act. If we have a new band, we have no claims that we can bring forward.
Both groups are hoping reinstatement can still be an option instead of creation of a new band.
I would like for them to bring us to the table and have a conversation with us rather than making decisions without us. This is our future, and we have the right to know what's going on firsthand.
The federal government says they are still reviewing the case and have no further comment at this time. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
We had some technical difficulties there, but we want to hear what you think. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send us your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/APTN News. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. In the north, residents and business owners have been speaking out over safety concerns about the emergency shelter in Whitehorse. And now they're speaking out about the city's proposed idea to deal with the problem, which they say is a band-aid solution. And a warning, some people might be offended by strong language used in this piece. APTN's Chris McIntyre has more.
Just a block away from Whitehorse Elementary sits the emergency shelter on 405 Alexander Street. Formerly run by the Salvation Army, the shelter is now in the hands of the Yukon government. Residents and business owners around the neighborhood say the situation on the property has gotten steadily worse and that it is common to see fights and public intoxication. In fact, when APTN was filming down the street, we had this encounter.
Film, buddy.
Well, I don't need you to do that.
I don't need you on the film, man.
Don't do that.
Nothing.
Don't do that.
Get it out of here, man. Because you're pointing it down here. You got no right to down here, man.
The city's solution, a beautification project. At a recent city council meeting, a motion was put forward and accepted to spend more than $150,000 to install planting beds, trees, and benches around the property. Frank, who didn't want to give us his last name, lives on Alexander Street. He has no problem with the beautification project, but his main concern is safety and a lack of security.
I think if we had a neighborhood watch that were documenting these things, putting down the times and the places, what's going on, we could accurately take a look at how out of control this problem is instead of everybody just saying, oh, well, this happens all the time or getting frustrated.
Are you doing a thing on this place?
Matthew Prophet, a member of the Nacho Nyack Dun First Nation and former resident of the shelter, feels that more benches aren't a good idea. The city recently removed some benches that were already on site.
They wanted some more benches and stuff, but yeah. I'm glad they're taking those benches they've put up around here because, you know, someone can get hurt.
After hearing public concern, City Council decided to put the project on hold for further discussion. We spoke with business owners and they say that the money would be better spent putting it into programming and harm reduction rather than a beautification project. Many residents at the shelter are from outside communities and say a programming with a First Nation focus would be beneficial to their wellness.
Christine Tapp is the director of the Social Support Branch with Health and Social Services. Tapp says that her office is working to provide more programming in all areas of wellness with residents.
I think we've taken a bit more of an active approach to our programming in the past month or so, and we have plans to expand that further into the fall, including reassigning a couple of staff members to focus just on programming and to actually work with our guests to develop and for them to lead some of that programming.
Meanwhile, the problems around the shelter aren't going to get better anytime soon. Chris McIntyre, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
A small community in the Northwest Territories is celebrating a big win today. That's because they just signed the deal for a massive new national park reserve, and it could set precedent for future land management between First Nations and Canada. Taiden Nene, Land of the Ancestors protects 26,000 square kilometers of water and boreal forest. Co-management of the space will be shared between Parks Canada and the Letsoke First Nation. Steve Naite, who has been working on the deal for the last 2 decades, says he believes this park will be used as a model for the rest of Canada.
For Letsoke, this is what reconciliation looks like. It's implementing through legal contractual agreements the spirit and intent of what we intended to create when we made Treaty of 1900, also known as Treaty Number 8, where we agreed to share the lands, the resources, the benefit from it, and we spelled that out within the Taiden boundary.
The Ethics Committee held its emergency meeting today in response to Ethics Commissioner Mario Dion's findings in the SNC-Lavalin scandal. The report found Trudeau in violation of the Conflict of Interest Act. when pressuring former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould to give the corporate giant a deferred prosecution agreement. Specifically, Section 9 of that Act, which prohibits those in public office to seek influence another person as to further their own interests or to improperly further another person's private interests. Last week, the Prime Minister disagreed with those conclusions. The Liberal MPs on the Ethics Committee turned down a motion that would allow the Ethics Commissioner to provide testimony. Green Party leader Elizabeth May says she was disturbed by the report's findings.
I try to approach things in a very nonpartisan way, and that's very hard on the eve of an election. Everybody goes into hyper-partisan mode, and this is, in a lot of ways, red meat right before an election, and I know that. But something was really wrong here. Something's deeply wrong here, and I beg my friends around the table to allow Monsieur Dion to speak to us. I thought I knew what had transpired on the SNC-Lavalin based on the testimony of our former Justice Minister and former Attorney General. Her chronology, her notes, I thought covered everything that had occurred, and I believed her in every syllable. But Monsieur Dion's report has shaken me far more than our former Attorney General's testimony.
After the break, we will go to Saskatchewan, where traditional gathering has been taking place for over 20 years. But first, let's take a look at tomorrow's weather. Starting in the east, Charlottetown is rainy and 25, Halifax is no rain and 22. La Grande River is partly cloudy and 20, Nain rainy and 10 degrees. Val d'Or has some rain at 17 degrees, Sept-Îles is 18 with rain. Ottawa is partly cloudy today at 23. London, Ontario is partly cloudy at 23 as well. Wawa is 16 with partly cloud. Sudbury rain and 19. Thompson is sunny and 21. The Paw is also sunny at 22. Brandon is sunny at 26. Prince Harbour is also sunny at 22. Saskatoon has some rain at 23. Estevan partly sunny at 27. Stony Rapids has some rain at 18. La Ronge is also rainy at 21. Welcome back. In northern Saskatchewan, one community has been gathering in a traditional setting for over 2 decades. It's a way to keep their families a priority and overcome residential school after effects. APTN's Priscilla Wolf has their story.
English River First Nation Health Director Bernie Eaglechild says this family conference started because of a tragedy and then grew to an event for healing and bonding.
A young guy drowned down the Churchill River, and for 2 or 3 years it was called the DJ Memorial Conference, and then it switched over to a family conference, so about 24 years in existence.
Hundreds of people gather to camp for the week and take part in community bonding workshops for the entire family. Some of the daily activities include massages, foot care, access bars, makeup, haircuts, and beading. All are free for the campers. One workshop presenter is author Harold Johnson. He wrote the book Firewater, How It's Killing My People.
Every time I come here, I'm impressed at the amount of work that they have done. I really don't think I've got anything that I can tell the people of Patchenak that they don't already know. They figured this out long before I did. They saw that alcohol was the problem and began working on it.
Events like this help all ages.
Nowadays, I think when you hear the word family, family being the basic unit of all things in life, like we've lost so many things over the years because of residential school, the relationship with children and everything. So that's what we're trying to get back here, is the reunification of what a family is.
Every morning is started with prayers and a pipe ceremony. Denise Gardapi's grandfather was invited to do the ceremonies, and this was the first time she attended the gathering.
We've been taking part in the pipe ceremonies. They were doing the beading yesterday, massaging. It's pretty good. We like it.
As an invited guest not from the area, she learned about the strong connection to the land that the community has. When she first arrived, she learned how they honor the land.
You can put pennies or pebbles into the lake and, tell them that We need to borrow some of your land for a while. Yeah. That was different. I never knew that.
Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, near English River First Nation.
That looks like a wonderful event. Gathering at the Pines in Ghana-Sadage today, Longhouse representatives and the community's traditionalists demanded intervention by the federal government to stop land and fraud and illegal development. Speaking on behalf of the Longhouse, activist Ellen Gabriel said they're giving Prime Minister Trudeau 10 days to respond to the demand, which falls in line with the territorial obligations within their constitution, the Great Law of Peace. Gabriel says the government's inaction violates fundamental land and human rights outlined in the Canadian Constitution. Continuing to evade these issues, she says, is taking a toll on all of Ghana-Sagage.
They say that we are not legitimate. And it's not up to Canada to decide whether we are legitimate or not. It's not up to Canada to decide what our rights are to our homelands. It's not their right to do so. But it's their people who are causing us harm. It's their people who are fraudulently selling land and developing on our homelands because they have allowed it to do so. And so it must take responsibility for causing this conflict that we have today.
The chief of Attawapiskat First Nation says he does not believe the federal government will fix his community's water contamination problem after a visit from the Minister of Indigenous Services. Will Fiddler brings us more.
After his visit to Attawapiskat on Sunday, the Minister of Indigenous Services Canada tweeted out his plans to fix their water crisis. In the short term, this week, we will bring in extra medical teams to evaluate any children or adults with health concerns. This week, we will bring in water technicians to work on the plant and fix the reverse osmosis units to make sure they are running well. We will flush out the water system completely to get those THM levels under control. That will happen now. The minister's long-term solution is a new water treatment center, but Chief Ignace Gall isn't so sure that the minister can deliver.
The big issue right now is that we haven't seen any commitment in terms of funding-wise. You know, we did receive $1.5 million way back, I would say, just to fix Band-Aid, fix one thing. But you know, living up here is that, you know, something might broke again tomorrow. The First Nation needs another $10 million to fix everything, to bring the water level to a safety, so people don't have to be afraid using it for washing, taking showers, or cleaning their food and vegetables, and for other many daily uses.
Attawapiskat declared a state of emergency earlier this month after levels of trihalomethanes, also known as THMs, and haloacidic acids, or HAAs, were found in the community's tap water. High THM levels is what caused Ibmatung First Nation to also declare a state of emergency this month. Gall said the federal government is failing them.
You know, you remember when the Prime Minister announced when he was elected back in 2015 of October, he said at that time that he would end all boil water advisories in the First Nation communities. And I mean, that's 4 years ago. And First Nations are still screaming for clean water.
In an email to APTN News, the minister's office repeated the same promises the minister tweeted out Sunday. Gall said his community is frustrated with a problem that should have been fixed long ago.
The studies have been done. We've been studied to death ever since this whole thing began in 1976 when they put in the water intake and the distribution system in 1994. You know, studies are collecting dust on shelves at Indigenous Services Canada. You know, we have everything identified, costed out, what needs to be done. So, you know, why reinvent the wheel, right? If you could just do the things that needs to be done because they're already identified.
Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
Time for a short break, but coming up, the Mi'kmaq Games are in full swing in Nova Scotia. But first, let's take a look at the rest of your weather. And in the prairies, high level is sunny and 18. Fort Chipewyan has some rain also at 18. Calgary is a little bit of rain at 24. Lethbridge also rainy at 24. Kamloops is sunny at 27. Bella Coola has a little bit of cloud with 21 degrees. Fort Nelson has rain at 18 degrees. Prince George is sunny at 19. Old Crow has some cloud at 13 degrees. Whitehorse is also a little bit of cloud at 17 degrees. Wrigley is rainy with 14 degrees. Fort Liard is also rainy at 18. Inuvik has some cloud at 10 degrees. Sax Harbor is rainy and 5. Repulse Bay is some rain at 17. Baker Lake, mostly sunny and 18 degrees as well. Igloolik has a little bit of cloud at 15 degrees. Pangerton also a little bit of cloud at 11. Welcome back. The Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Summer Games are in full swing on the Wabaga First Nation. This year, some athletes will be going home with more than just a medal. Some top performers will earn cash prizes. But as CTV Ryan McDonald explains, the focus is still on having fun and celebrating culture.
With a picturesque mountain backdrop and temperatures nearing 30 degrees, you could not have ordered a better day at the Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Summer Games being held this year on the Waccamaw First Nation. For Naleen Peck and her relatives from all over Runamaki, coming together for the games is like a family reunion of sorts.
We see all our families and everybody gets together and has a good time and supports each other.
This young member of the family was among many medaling today in the Special Olympics portion of the games. For the athletes who hail from here in Waccamaw, it means a lot to have the games in their home community for the first time since 2013.
I know it only happens every 6 years, and in 6 years really feels like a long time after it's over.
In all, there are 2,300 registered athletes competing in dozens of events. Factor in volunteers, coaches, and spectators, and roughly 4,000 people have descended upon Waccamaw this week, pretty much quadrupling the community's population.
Our gas station's busy, our Tim Hortons is busy, all the campgrounds are packed, all the restaurants are busy every day, so yeah, there's definitely spin-offs to having the games in our community.
Some competitors are going home with more money in their wallets too. New this year, cash prizes along with medals for certain events, the first time for this kind of enticement here at the Summer Games.
Those events in particular where numbers were going down, so we tried to add incentive to hopefully increase that event back up.
Competition for the Summer Games wraps up on Sunday, but prior to that, a lot of people here are looking forward to Saturday evening, when a concert featuring Classified will take place here in Waccamaw.
He's been a big advocate for that missing and murdered Indigenous woman for us, so we're excited for him to come.
Despite the new motivation of money, those we spoke with here at the Games say they still enjoy them for the same reasons they always did.
That everybody gets to play, everybody gets a chance to do something, means a lot. It's our culture, it's everything to us, I guess.
And when the week of competition is over, you can take it to the bank that most of these athletes will have had a blast. Ryan McDonald, CTV News on the Waccamaw First Nation.
Oh, that looks super fun. A group of tourists got a little more excitement than they were expecting from a recent safari outing in South Africa. A white rhino started chasing their vehicle as they were taking pictures in a private game reserve. The rhino kept after them for nearly 2 minutes, forcing their guide to make some fancy maneuvers to keep the group clear of the charging animal. The rhino eventually began to tire and gave up. And that is your news for this Wednesday. Be sure to check out our webpage and app for more details on these stories and more. Have a great evening.